Supercompressor dive watches have had a huge resurgence in the last couple of years. I'm sure you can think of dozens of dive watches that have come out with these dual crowns and inner rotating bezels, but the truth is, almost all of those aren't really Supercompressor dive watches. But when microbrand RZE decided to release their own take on the Supercompressor watch, they not only copied the style of the Supercompressors of the 1960s and 70s, they actually went and built a genuine Supercompressor case. What does that mean? Why is it relevant to you? We're going to get into all of that in this review. Today we're taking a look at the Resolute Supercompressor from RZE watches. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave, I live in Japan, and I love to collect affordable watches. And today we're going to be taking a look at a watch from RZE, which is pretty interesting. There's going to be some twists and turns here, but the short version is that this is a watch that is made out of titanium. It's incredibly light, features a great design, great build quality, and some really unique engineering going on within the case. And overall, I really like it. But it does seem to have a little bit of an identity crisis, which we'll get into more as we go along. The most interesting thing about this watch is that RZE has engineered a watch case that actually uses the same method of water sealing it as the original Supercompressor dive watches from the 60s and 70s did. And while the style of the Supercompressor watch has been copied far and wide, very few watch manufacturers have actually gone through the trouble of using a Supercompressor case. I think Christopher Ward was the first one to kind of really reintroduce the actual Supercompressor case with their release a year ago. And there may have been one or two others since then, but I'm pretty sure this is the first actually titanium Supercompressor cased watch possibly that's ever been made. Now, what actually is a Supercompressor watch? Why would you want one? We're going to get into all of that in this review, but first let's take a look at the dimensions and specifications on this watch and check out the price. Now, the watch that we're going to be taking a look at today is a prototype from RZE. However, they did promise to send me a production model when they're ready, which is why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this video. However, other than the watch itself, RZE did not provide any compensation for this review, nor did they have any input into the content of the review. Dimensions and specifications, you're getting a 40mm case with 20mm lugs, a nice 46mm lug to lug. The production models will be 12mm thick with 200 meters of water resistance. The watch features a titanium case and bracelet with RZE's proprietary Ultra Hex scratch resistant coating. Inside you're getting a Miyota 90S5 movement. At the time of this review, RZE is running a launch special where you can pick this one up for $639. When that's over, the full retail will be $699. Now, the unit that I have here in for review is a prototype, and on this one, you've only got 100 meters of water resistance, and the case is actually thinner at 11 millimeters. However, the production version will have 200 meters of water resistance, and with that, you're going to have a little bit thicker case at 12 millimeters. It's notable that on this watch, RZE has used a Miyota 9000 series movement, the 90S5 basically being like a Miyota 9015 without the date. So there is no ghost date position on this no date watch, which is great to see. On most of their previous releases, they've gone with the Seiko NH35, so this is definitely a big upgrade from that. With that, you're going to get a smoother 28,800 BPH sweep on the second hand, which is equivalent to about 8 ticks per second. A thinner movement. The Miyota 9000 series movements are Miyota's premium grade of movements. They compare very favorably to entry-level Swiss automatic movements, while being quite a bit more affordable. Factoring in that this watch has a genuine Supercompressor case, which we're going to talk a lot more about in just a minute here. From a specifications and technical standpoint, I think RZE is definitely giving you your money's worth. So looking at this watch, you can see a lot of the hallmarks of the Supercompressor watches of the past. You've got the dual crowns, you've got the little hash marks on the side of one of the crowns, you've got the inner rotating bezel, but then they've also gone in a different direction in a number of areas. The most noticeable is probably the fact that they did a 12-hour bezel instead of a dive time bezel. So you can actually use this watch for tracking a second time zone. And unlike most other companies that are doing a supercompressor style watch, RZE did not bring the sort of vintage 1970s look. They've kept their own sort of design language and DNA, which is actually very modern and kind of industrial. But at the heart of this watch is the case, which has some pretty unique engineering going on inside of it. And I want to talk a little bit about that first. A supercompressor is a certain style of dive watch which was released by a lot of popular brands in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. These watches all had cases manufactured by Swiss firm EPSA. These cases had a patented spring-loaded case back that allowed the cases to become more water resistant the deeper they dove in the water. This design took advantage of the increase in water pressure, utilizing it to press the case back more firmly into the watertight seal or O-ring inside the case. This was a pretty revolutionary concept for a case design at the time, and it came with two big benefits. The first was obviously a high water resistance rating, which these watches were really renowned for in their time. The second is that it allowed the case back to not always be pressing firmly against that O-ring. When you weren't diving deep under the water, the case would be a little bit more relaxed, putting less stress on that watertight seal and improving its longevity. Now, modern watertight seals in watches have rendered the first benefit pretty much obsolete. You can get highly water-resistant watches nowadays without needing a supercompressor case. But the second benefit could actually still be practical. Theoretically, relieving that pressure or tension on the gasket when you're not diving could allow it to have a longer lifespan, potentially allowing a dive watch to retain its water resistance for a longer period of time without needing that gasket replaced. So it's kind of cool to think that this old technology that a lot of people consider to be obsolete might actually have a few practical benefits for dive watches today. But the reality is, creating an actual supercompressor case in a modern dive watch like RZE has done here is primarily of interest from a historical and engineering perspective. Recently, people have been falling in love with the style of supercompressor watches, which has resulted in the market being completely flooded with dive watches that have dual crowns and inner rotating bezels. However, nearly all of these watches are simply mimicking the style of those supercompressor watches while omitting the key engineering and design features that really define the supercompressor. And so while a lot of people are probably going to ask, do I really want to pay more money for the extra manufacturing and engineering and design that goes into this watch, even though it is kind of obsolete? I think a lot of people are going to look at this and appreciate it for the same reason that we appreciate mechanical movements in a wristwatch. We admire not just the designs and the aesthetics of the past, but also the engineering and the ingenuity that actually made these watches function in such an amazing way. And so I think from that perspective, it's really cool to see a micro brand like RZE go the extra mile to actually engineer a supercompressor case and put one on the market like this. And that is one of the biggest selling points of this watch. But despite that, I think a lot of people still aren't really going to care that much. I mean, these supercompressor style watches have been selling like crazy even without an actual supercompressor case. And so there may be a lot of people who just want to get a watch from RZE that's titanium, that has that supercompressor look. And I think RZE really delivers on that angle as well. Even if this watch didn't have a supercompressor case inside of it, it would still be a great watch. The overall design language here is similar to what RZE has done on some of their other watches, which is generally a good thing. This has a really cool modern look with a nice combination of curves and angles. Combined with the matte finish of the case, this really has kind of a very industrial sort of look to it. And this is a look that RZE has been cultivating for a while. It's great to see a brand kind of develop their own unique design language and identity. But while the identity of this watch is very clearly something from RZE, when we talk about the identity of this particular supercompressor, that's where things get perhaps a little bit muddled. A supercompressor is a dive watch, but they have this build as a field watch. So from RZE's perspective, what they've done is they've created a field watch with a supercompressor case and 200 meters of water resistance. But then the dial design and the handset both look like a dive watch, particularly when they've got a minute hand that has an accent color on it like this. Something commonly seen on dive watches so that the minute hand stands out for quicker use at reading the elapsed time bezel for timing your dive times. But then this doesn't have a dive time bezel. It's got a 12-hour bezel that's usually used for tracking second time zones on travel watches. But then for travel watches, I typically prefer to have a date personally, but they've gone for the more aesthetically pleasing no date option. But while I'm not sure exactly what identity this watch is going for, whatever it is, I actually really like it. The dual crowns and the inner rotating bezel really give this watch a unique identity and set it apart from RZE's other offerings. But like they've done with all of their other watches, they've come up with just a really comfortable, easy to wear titanium case, which is just so insanely comfortable on the wrist. Like, there's just no other watches that I've worn that have a metal bracelet other than these watches from RZE that are just this comfortable. I often find myself checking my wrist to see if I actually have a watch on because I really can't feel it on my wrist half the time. And I don't really care if the 12-hour bezel is off theme. I just love 12-hour bezels. From a practical standpoint, they're great at keeping track of a second time zone, and you can still use it really easily for timing things. So from a user experience perspective, this just might be the best watch RZE has made to date. All right, next we're going to do a full rundown on the lume on this watch because I love things that glow in the dark. But before that, a quick reminder, check out the t-shirt shop. You can get this cool F91W shirt on my website at justthewatch.com. Got that and a lot of other cool designs. Check it out, help support the channel. Lume on the Resolute Supercompressor looks amazing, and the longevity is actually pretty good. The white dial version is actually a fully lumed dial, which glows a pretty bright blue in the dark. The hands, markers, and bezels both feature a mixture of blue and green lume. Now, they haven't listed exactly which formulations these are, but judging by the performance and the color, I'm going to guess it's BGW9 and C3. Now, bicolor lume can come across a little bit tacky if you do it wrong, but RZE has just done a great job of utilizing the different colors to give different accents and just a really appealing look. Putting this through my J-score tests, after 1 hour, this came in with a score of 9, which tied the Zelos Spearfish. And that means it's going to be pretty comparable to Seiko's entry-level Pro Specs divers, which is to say it's pretty good. Now, the one drawback to this lume profile where you're using a fully lumed dial along with lumed hands and markers is that while it looks amazing, especially at first when it's fully charged, as the night wears on and the lume begins to fade, you're going to lose some contrast between the brightness of the hands, markers, and the dial, making it fairly difficult to read. If you're after straight functionality when it comes to lume, you either want a fully lumed dial with blacked out hands and markers so that they can be easily seen against that fully lumed dial, or you want to only lume the hands and markers so that they stand out against a black background. So in this configuration, you're sacrificing legibility for something that admittedly looks pretty darn cool. Now, this is a watch that I really like from RZE, but there are a couple of things I think could be improved. We've already talked about a few of them. Maybe it would have made more sense for them to kind of lean more fully into the identity of a dive watch on this piece. Or if they wanted to make it more of a travel watch, I would like to see a date on the dial. Those are largely issues of personal preference. As far as actual cons to the build quality and things, there's only one area that did kind of stand out, and that's with the action on the inner rotating bezel. It operates easily and bidirectionally on the crown. However, the action is a little bit loose. And the gearing is actually a little bit on the loud side. You can hear it, and it's just not like a perfectly smooth operation of it as you move the crown around. Let me see if I can show you what it sounds like. The other issue is that the crown that operates at inner rotating bezel is a screw-down crown. Now, on the one hand, that's inconvenient because that means you have to unscrew it every time you want to adjust the bezel. But the other problems that I found is that when you are screwing the crown back in, often the bezel will still be engaged slightly and it will jump a little bit, which can make it a little bit frustrating when you're trying to line the bezel up exactly. But overall, I really like what RZE has done with this watch from the design standpoint. And I think it is a really cool accomplishment that they actually created a supercompressor case. For me personally, well, I think it's cool. I'm more attracted to the other aspects of this watch. I love the comfort. I love that it's titanium. I do like the dual bezel layout. I think it's cool and it's unique and it looks different. I like 12-hour bezels. So part of me would kind of like to see this watch with the supercompressor case kind of actually dropped and just really leaning into this as a field watch, travel watch. Maybe keep it at the 100 meters of water resistance with a slimmer case and drop the price down by $100. For me personally, that would be a more appealing option than this one. Or maybe take it the other way and again, really lean into that identity as a supercompressor, put a dive time bezel on it and kind of market it under your dive watch category. Maybe make it the Endeavor Supercompressor. Anyways, that's my take on this watch. I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at it. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Are you a fan of supercompressor watches? If so, how do you think this one stacks up against the alternatives on the market right now? I'll also be leaving links to RZE's website down below where you can purchase this watch directly from them. That will wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.